Здравствуйте, дорогие друзья! Сегодня в «Зеленой» гостиной выдающийся певец действительно мирового уровня, подлинная звезда Ферруччо Фурланетто. Он приехал сейчас в Россию, конечно, не в первый раз, и будет петь в спектакле «Дон Карлос» на сцене Большого театра. До этого в Большом Ферруччо Фурланетто выступал в партии Захария в Набукко и пел Бориса Годунова на нашей исторической сцене. Маэстро Ферруччо Фурланетто, I am so happy to greet you in our green room.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
I'm saying to our spectators that it's not your first time in Большого, of course, that you were doing here Nabukko and you were singing Boris on our historic
And
stage.
Don Quixote?
Yes, traveling
Yes.
with Mariinsky Theatre.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And now it will be Filippo
Carlo.
in Don Carlo.
Yeah.
My question would be, my first question is that I understand you came to this profession when you were 22.
Mm-hmm.
Why you spent
Right.
this first 22 years without thinking of opera?
Because I was playing guitar, having a group and singing pop. And don't forget that it was the second half of the 60s.
Right.
So a very special time for that. And I was at school, so it was fun, big fun. Of course, I grew up since I was a little boy with the knowledge of having a voice. But in those years, pop was something new coming, and to be part of it, to play guitar, and to have this group. Then I did also a bit professionally pop, because I was hired by a very important recording company, CBS, and I made few recordings, few TV in those years, 67, 68, something like that. And I loved to sing, but I didn't like the ambience of the pop, of the professional pop. There was already at that time some drugs circulating, and for a guy coming from the country, it was a bit scary. And therefore, I quitted. I continued my school, which was totally different, not in music, was a humanistic school, Liceo Classico in Italy, so a lot of ancient Greek, Latin, philosophy, which gives you nothing in practical terms, but it opens all the ways to universities, whatever you want to go. And it was in this moment when I started university, and I started university with the final target of forestry, because I always loved nature and I was attracted by that. And in this moment, following the advice and the request of a sister of my mother, who sang opera for a short while, I tried, because I felt the responsibility towards nature that gave me a voice to do, or at least to try to do something with it. And my aunt told me, you must come to Mantova, it's a big city south of Milano, where there was a very, very famous voice teacher, Ettore Campogalliani. Campogalliani, just to make it short, has been the teacher of Mirella Freni, Pavarotti, and people like that.
Teacher number one.
So I went. I even learned an aria, the shortest possible. It was a Boccanegra. It's 2.5 pages, so he didn't want even to listen to it. He just went to the piano and he wanted to understand my range of voice. And he said, you're a bass, your voice is very interesting, you should study. And so I started to go twice per week from Friuli, which is a very east corner of Italy, northeast corner, to Mantova, which was almost 3 hours by train to go and to come back. And I was there, I was doing that for 1 year, more or less. And then after 1 year, I started to make competitions with some success. Being a bass, you never win. And I must say that exactly 1 year after this new start in life, I had my very first step on stage, following a competition where I was second, but one of the prizes, apart from the little money that they were giving us, was the debut. Mm-hmm. And it was on the last 19th of March past, it was 47 years ago. It's amazing. It was Rigoletto, Sparafucile, the killer. And after that, I was hired through an audition in Trieste for a bohème, a very quite interesting bohème for those times, because the tenor was a young guy called José Carreras, and the soprano Katia Ricciarelli. So it was quite a lovely debut. And immediately after, in Torino, I was sang at the very last moment to sing the first 3 performances of Don Carlo as the monk, Charles V, the one who sings at the beginning, with Boris Christoph as Filippo, and Bruzon, Renato Bruzon, and that was the beginning of it. And after a few years, really few, because it was 74, 75, in 78 I was already in the States, having my debut in New Orleans, in Nabukko, and the year after in San Francisco, in a very famous Gioconda, played world telecast with Pavarotti and Renata Scotto, and the year after the debut the Met, as the Grand Inquisitor in Don Carlo, a role that I never did after that.
It was Bing, it was Volpi who was running Met?
Oh no, at the time was before Volpi, was still Bing. Was still
so
Bing.
He came in his time.
The very last, the artistic director was Lady Mrs. Ingpen. Jimmy Levine, of course, was the big boss, and I started a collaboration with a theater that is still.
So your professional education was just this incredible professor with whom you had twice a week these lessons, and in this rather short time period, you already prepared some roles that you could jump so fast in such a great world of music.
The only role that I learned in that early time was for a competition, because part of the rules to be part of the competition was to know by heart one role. And so I learned in Italian Zauberflöte, Sarastro, without the recitatives, of course, because they were not necessary. But then the big advantage of being Italian is that in Italy, we still have, but at that time they were all working, a lot of theaters. 13 or 12 major houses, and then many theaters in the province, here and there, with an history behind, with a small season. Therefore, I never ever had the necessity to belong to a theater, to be fest, like they say in Germany, to a theater. I was freelancing from the very beginning.
But were you obliged to have your own agent who looked after you?
No, because I will say that the first 3-4 years I was just waiting for calls. And the calls were coming. And I was jumping from a place to another for a month or two, and that was very, very important, because to be freelance is very important, because you can really concentrate on yourself, do what you want and what you feel like, rather than what they impose. And then, after, let's say, these 4 or 5 years of basically Italian career, I started with the States and with France. My very first contract abroad was for the festival in Aix-en-Provence. A very simple role, the doctor in Traviata. But being a young singer, I had a very beautiful recital in a cloister, piano, and the prologue of Mephistopheles with orchestra in the cathedral. So I had the chance to work with the little doctor, but also to show my possibilities with some important stuff. And it was on that occasion, on the occasion of that Mephistopheles, that I was heard by somebody American who spoke about me to Nellie Walter, who was one of the big bosses of Columbia artists. And she, during one of her many trips in Europe, she met me in Vienna. I went on purpose there to meet her. I had the audition in a studio of another agent, colleague of hers, and she hired me for the debut in New Orleans and Metropolitan.
Because I understand you were saying that it's very important when you're young to sing Mozart because it goes for basses, because it goes well with your young nature and you could be natural and don't force your voice, etc. But I wonder, being a young man, did you understand it all yourself, or did you had any good advisors from your teacher or from, I don't know, concertmaster?
Well, Campogalliani was he didn't have a voice. He was a great pianist. And with the piano, he could give you the idea of what he wanted as interpretation and economy of the phrase, of the breath. Of course, at the beginning, he didn't ask me to do anything too heavy. We were doing arias for some concert. Of course, I could do the aria of Filippo, but it's nothing in comparison to the full piece. And at that time, of course, I was a young kid and I grew up with a role model in front of me that was Cesare Siepi. And Cesare Siepi had a typical Mediterranean voice, color, that he was a basso cantabile, and he was, and he probably still is, the greatest Don Giovanni ever, because when he did his Don Giovanni with Furtwängler in Salzburg in '54, that video, thank God there was a video, is a dream. And so I was just growing up and tried to follow his tracks. If he did Mozart, I must do Mozart, and was a good choice. Was a good choice because, as I said in another occasion, the roles in Mozart are all young men. There are no high priests, kings, tsars, or devils. And you just need to be yourself. You don't need to masquerade your voice just to try to sound older or nastier. And this really made me grow vocally in the right direction and in a very easy way, and working, because I was doing a lot of Mozart in those for good 25 years, mostly Mozart. And everywhere I'm with the greatest conductors, greatest directors, greatest productions.
But were you feeling your own age? Were you thinking at a certain moment, now Mozart should stay in the past and I should move to another repertoire? Or it was all in your life just coming by itself?
No, when it came that moment, it wasn't because I was fed up with Mozart, or because being older the voice wasn't to respond to it. On the contrary, it was maybe easier than before. But I repeat, being this character, young man, They had to jump, to roll, and to dance and to do whatever. And at a certain moment in your life, these things are becoming a bit heavy. Therefore, I said, now it's time to go into serious stuff, kings, tsars, high priests and devils.
You're praised by press not only as a great singer, but as an outstanding actor. Did you ever had some acting classes? Did you ever study this? How all is that coming?
I was lucky, extremely lucky to work with the greatest directors that we had in those years, like for the Mozart, Jean-Pierre Ponel, #1, but for the rest, I mean, Giorgio Strehla, Piero Fagioni, Pierluigi Pizzi, and many others who probably didn't have the same big name, but they were extremely prepared and done for opera. But over all of them, for the Mozart, Jean-Pierre Ponel was the one who understood that in this young man there was a possibility to take out his acting possibilities. And it was amazing. My first Figaro in Nozze was in Paris, in a festival that they were doing at that time in the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées with Danny Barenboim. And my Susanna was for the first time singing Susanna in Italian Kettle in Battle. Lucia Pop was the Countess. I mean, and I will never forget, we were with Ponel, we were working in a big room somehow away from the theater, and we were working some days even 10, 11 hours. And we were never, ever tired, because we could see our characters getting shape, you know, and growing up and becoming Figaro, Susanna, or Count, whatever. And it was...
How was he doing it? He was talking to you, explaining, showing?
Yes, of course, he was showing. He was speaking a very good Italian. He was understanding deeply the double, triple meanings of the Da Ponte text. And he was playing with it. He was a musician because when he was a young man, he was a pianist. Then he had an accident and he broke both wrists, and his career as a pianist finished. But he started as a costume designer, and then when he was fed up to see his work destroyed by some other director, started to
direct himself.
And he was a god. Just to make it short, I tell you, he died very young. He was 56. He had a life, I mean, he was smoking 100 cigarettes a day, drinking wine, whiskey, this and that. I mean, really having his own life as he wished. He died in '88, and every year since his death, every year I dream at least once that he's coming back and that we are working in some production again. It was so strong, the impact and the beauty of working with a genius like that. And everybody who had the luck to work with him will tell you the same thing. Everybody.
And once you prepare your role, for example, I know your outstanding debut in Salzburg with Philip and Don Carlo, how it happened with Karajan.
That was not a debut, I mean.
No, I mean, that was in this role that you had to jump in to replace somebody. Yeah. And you said that you bought the wig from this production, right?
Yeah.
And because I've heard it in several of your interviews, and that this wig is always with you, so I believe here in Russia also.
Also.
But does it mean that your Philip as a character already exists, and no matter who is the director, where is the production, your role is done, or your role can be reshaped?
Well, listen, when I jumped in that Don Carlo, it was 5 years after my first Philip. which was a Philip of a young man, not bad, but of course with a lot of space for improvement. And but it was so important to have done those 5 years, because when I was called that morning at 9:30 by the theater, please come because you have to look at the video of the production, because Filippo must be in a certain position for the cameras, and then you have to try the costume, because today there is the Generale and Saturday the premiere. At that time it was only a matter of Generale and premiere. Public at the Generale was with smoking and for the TV. And I couldn't imagine that they would have, although I had a contract for covering, but I mean, Karajan could have done like this, and all the best basses of the time would have jumped, really, physically. And he trusted this young man with whom he had an audition.
He heard you before, he knew.
3 years before.
Yes.
And I went, I saw the video, I went to try the costume, they had to be adjusted. And I tried my makeup, my famous wig. And 15 minutes before the beginning, I went to see Maestro, who told me, so in this moment I will give you, in the duet with Pose, I remember, I will give you the cue, because there will be a moment of suspense, but don't look at me, because since we have the movie Laserdisc, everything was going on there on this occasion. I don't want to see the singer, you know, looking at the maestro. Okay, and then we said, when the aria, as I sang it 3 years before for him, for my audition, sing the aria like you did 3 years ago, and I will accompany you. I never heard this phrase again in my life.
Tugan didn't said you the same yet, maybe.
A conductor, they don't like to accompany, and they will never tell you that. But of course Karajan in that occasion knew that it was quite an emergency to throw on stage a young man, okay, who did the role before, but I didn't have 1 single minute on stage.
And when you were singing this role on stage, do you remember something from this moment on stage?
I went in for my first important, let's say, phrases, when he discovers the queen alone in the garden, and my heart was relaxed. I was calm. Of course, I was concentrated. There was a tension, but not here, like it was happening before. And that day really changed my life in this matter, because I learned that if you are not in that condition, you cancel. Because otherwise you cannot give your best.
Just know that you worked with so many absolutely outstanding people, even what you mentioned already, all the singers with whom you started, but also all the conductors with whom you worked. It's just impossible to believe all these names. And yet, you're saying yourself that Karajan stays apart, that he is like a god. Why? What is so special about him? I was wondering if also performing with him on stage you would have been lifted on some higher, I don't know.
I tell you,
I don't know what.
That man, whatever repertoire he touched, was becoming the best, super. He didn't have limits like many other great conductors. Maybe they are good for Verdi and so for Mozart, or whatever he was touching was pure gold. Many other conductors who were directing theaters were jealous of the others, and they were trying to not invite them in their houses. Karajan, for his personal festival, he was inviting everybody. Giulini, Bernstein, Scholti, and the young one at the time, Abbado, Muti, Levine. So
he had no fear, of course.
No, he knew that he was there, and the rest was welcome, but there was no, from his side, there was no feeling of competition.
After this night of Don Carlo in Salzburg, you worked again with Karajan, of course. How was it to work with him?
It was always extremely easy. Of course, he was demanding, but we knew. For instance, there was a shocking experience, because one of his major dreams was to be the Konzertmeister, Kapellmeister, in a religious ceremony in Vatican for the Pope. And in 85, June 29th, it happened. So we went to the St. Peter Basilica in Rome. There was a big ceremony. The Pope was directing it with all the cardinals seated there. The orchestra here, the Wiener Singverein behind. I was with my great colleague Gösta Wimberg, Trudelise Schmidt, and Tomova Sintova, Cathy Battle, Cathy Battle. And we were doing the Coronation Mass by Mozart. We were there in Rome for a few days, rehearsing with the maestro, and in the church, because again there was movie, Laserdisc, whatever. And maybe 2 days before the event, he said, "You know, I think you should do it by heart." Why, maestro? Because I was seeing this morning with the TV rehearsals that it would be so beautiful to see these four heads like this, dum, 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 and not like this. And we did it.
All of you learned?
Yeah, we went back to the hotel, and it was a full immersion until it's not a big piece, okay, but still. And we did it. And I must say that if you look even now to that moment, he was right. He was right because you and it was extremely touching. He was already suffering a lot physically. And he was at that distance from me. And you could see the muscle here of the jaw. And nevertheless, the way that man was filtering the music and put it together, all this piece. Just to give you an example, when we were recording Don Giovanni in Berlin, and it was the year before we did it on stage. We were in Berlin at the Philharmonie, and I had the chance, being there, to attend a concert of Karajan with his Berliner, and his Berliner were amazing. It was Brahms and something else, but Brahms I remember. And it never happened before in my life or after. And still, I cannot really know the cause of it. But I found myself in the audience crying like a lamb. And I wasn't so familiar with this piece that he was playing. But the way it came to me, it was, for that reason, I think, I call him God.
This is really, I think, the highest way to appreciate the art, when something unexpected like this, beyond your mind.
And I was ashamed to be crying, because, I mean, the people next to me would think that I am totally cuckoo, and I don't know. And I was not. I swear, it never happened again, never. But that day, I mean, to look at him and to receive what he was doing.
You said that when you were young, you didn't like this atmosphere of pop music, these drugs and etc.
I love to sing, but I didn't like
Right.
this.
But how you feel about opera world, traveling so much and being in this world for 47 years?
There is a big difference, because in pop, and I remember I was singing in very important places with very important musicians. There was a saxophonist called Fausto Papetti, who was extremely known, and I was singing few songs with his group, but for people dancing. They were not there to listen, they were there to dance. When I came to opera and I saw an audience just also magnetic situation of these people there just to listen at you, and what you are doing is for them and they will receive it 100%. This was another planet.
You name so many great names. Are you friend with them off stage as well? Or you coming and going and you don't socialize so much with people?
But you know, with this kind of profession where you are 1 month and a half, 2 in a place and then you go to the next, you have many friends between your colleagues, but let's say, I must say that only with 1 or 2 there was sort of continuation.
Constant relations.
It was absolutely lovely to see them again, to go out for dinners, to spend time, but then you keep going, you know, it's to be constantly on your way doesn't give you the chance to
become close.
To become so close.
As we're sitting here in Bolshoi, I wonder when you for the first time heard the word Bolshoi and how you became aware that this is a place where they have their own, I don't know, culture, music, great names.
Well, of course, when I started to sing opera, I knew that this was the temple in this country. And when I got closer to the Russian music and to the Russian culture and atmosphere, even before coming to Russia, I knew that it was a very special place where culture is a very favorite.
I just wonder, because in your childhood, I don't know, in your home probably you had television, but not so much of Bolshoi projection. And I don't know if you came to the Bolshoi on tour in Italy when they came in Milan.
No. It was
so later, maybe.
It was before I started to be in the profession. I know, for instance, my good friend Leo Nucci, who came.
I spoke to him.
Yeah, in that occasion. But, you know, then it became something like a disease to be part of it when I did my first Boris in Roma with Piero Fagioni. And that production was glorious. The coronation is exactly the reconstruction of the little church of the Kremlin where it was happening. Piero, with whom I spoke yesterday to him, he's over 80 now. He told me that when he had to make this production, he came to Moscow and he spent 1 night in the Red Square making photo of the Church of St. Basil every hour to find the difference of colors with the progression of the night or the coming of the day. He was absolutely in love with what he was doing, and you could feel it, and it was sensational to be part of it.
Preparing such historical role as Boris, who really existed in the Russian history, do you really, because Shaliapin did, he had to look with Khrushchevsky, I think, over the history and after the Boris and what he did and how he was in real life. Did you have to do through this process or not?
Oh,
because
yes,
in the opera he's different anyway.
A very good friend of mine who is Semyon Bichkov, when he heard that I had my first contact with Boris, he sent me a big book in English like that about not only the story of Boris, but the story of the Tsars and Russia in those centuries. And I went through it because I think it was extremely important to digest a different kind of culture, of traditions, of history, and it was very, very, very important to do that. Then, of course, when finally I did a production in Milano, which was a same production that I came to St. Petersburg with Valery Gergiev, but that production was a kind of modern, it would not help. In fact, they got rid of it pretty so fast. But after that, first of all, it was very important to do it on the very stage where it happened for the first time. That was
special moment.
Yes, quite a moment. I felt the same when I put my foot for the first time on the stage of La Fenice, where many things started there. Traviata, for instance. And to do it in St. Petersburg, it was magnificent, apart from the production. And then when I had the offer to come here, to do it in this temple, in the production of 1948, which is a dream, is a beauty. The costumes are the costume that you should have. Everything, the studio of of the Tsar is exactly the photocopy of the studios in the Kremlin. It was even more becoming part of this history. And I will never forget that those 2 nights. I mean, and I will never forget the sound of your chorus. I mean, I did many Boris before that, but the wave of sound coming from these people here in this theater was unique. And again, it makes easier to become part of it.
One of the major subjects for Boris is his death. Actually, the whole story goes to his death. And this is a very key moment. And I also have heard that you personally, you don't like religion too much because you think that religion is manipulation of people. But I wonder if you still believe in something beyond this reality. And what is your personal attitude towards this matter?
I don't know that I believe in something. I just need, I was studying for forestry. I was looking at nature in every aspect, from butterflies to big things. They cannot be here by accident. So there must be something, an order, something that we cannot explain, because it would be like to ask to a little ant what it thinks about our world. They wouldn't have any idea. It's, and I don't like to give explanation, and I don't like religions because of this, because they try, after all, they are going after power and money. It's simple. And they do that since, not centuries, 1,000 years. So it's, I think that maybe 1,000 years ago, people were a bit more silly, stupid, or not educated to believe to all these fairy tales. Now it's quite hard. But nevertheless, yes, you feel your being, the fact that you are living, the fact that you have feelings, joys, fears. All this is part of a world that we cannot explain, but it's beautiful. It's beautiful, and the most important thing is just to behave as a man in a way that you will not affect the freedom or the wellness of the others. This is the most important thing.
We speak with you today. It's 200 years anniversary of Baudelaire today, and one of the Baudelaire book was named Artificial Paradise. And of course, in this artificial paradise, he spoke about some substitute of real life through the drugs, maybe, or something. Do you think that opera world and music is this kind of artificial paradise which can help us in this world to find some better reality?
First, I don't think that it's artificial because it costs a lot of fatigue, preparation, study. I mean, it's not artificial. You just give the chance to yourself first and to an audience to have 3-4 hours of paradise. Yes, why not? And then it helps to face a normal life. You go back with another spirit, or you go home if you received something, of course. Every time I have the chance to sing my favorite Don Quixote, and after his final scene, like in Boris, same story, it's such a privilege. And it's a privilege for the performer, but it's a privilege also for the people who are receiving this message. Of course, it cannot last more than those 3 hours, but it's better to get it than not to get it. You cannot compare this to drugs, of course. I mean, if you take drugs, or drink, you're totally cuckoo for some hours. You're basically stupid. You are throwing away your dignity.
In your profession, what gives you the biggest pleasure? With all this preparation, with all this tough way to learn the roles and to perform and to travel.
The moment
of your sheer pleasure.
The moment I am on stage for the real thing, and there are scenes and moments, for instance, the monologue of Boris in the children's room is something that you do first of all for yourself. And it's the only way to be honest towards an audience if you do it for yourself. Because then you are 100% believable and honest. Therefore, to have the chance to be on stage, being one of these characters in these specific scenes that are the apex of the opera that you're doing, this is an enormous privilege. It's not profession. I cannot call it profession. It's only a privilege.
My last question would be, in your ideal world, what would you like to sing in the coming season?
I will love, at this stage of my life, of course, no Mozart. No, although I've been asked recently to do the Commendatore, I said, come on, by Danny Barenboim.
You hardly can reject him.
After having sang Giovanni de Porero, no, please. I mean, I prefer to go without touching certain things. What I would like to do, these 4 roles that I love.
Boris,
of course. Don Quixote. King Philip. And a very not unknown, but not given so often as it should, opera, which is The Murder in the Cathedral by Pizzetti. the life and the story of Thomas Becket, ending with the death again.
That's the end.
except King Philip, in the Canterbury Cathedral, where I've been and where he wasn't killed on the altar as they like to show in some productions or in some movies. I remember a movie with Richard Burton, was beautiful. He was killed in a little room next to the main altar, and it would be my dream, and we were almost there with Gergiev when he was chief in London Symphony, to do it in a sort of semi-staged, because for the staging of modern cathedral you need a room like this, not more than that. Because the chorus can be placed alla greca, and the coryphée telling the story also. So what is happening in the apparitions to Becket and then the final scene can be really reduced in front of an altar, like in Canterbury, and to do it there,
in this atmosphere,
it would be stunning.
I understand clearly that this is one of your favorite roles,
Oh yeah.
And so I hope
it's something, though, that I mean, I'm looking forward to something that could happen very soon, because it's very important, heavy, and I mean, I'm not a teenager.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you.
I said you're not teaching young people, but whenever one has a
I talk
chance...
to young people. I cannot teach.
Yes, but once one can meet you, it's a great privilege, because it's very interesting to talk to you with somebody who has such also not only fame and not only popularity, but great dignity and true understanding of this nature. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.